I discovered my husband was cheating on me with my own sister on a random Thursday afternoon. And the moment I realized it, something inside me went completely silent. Not screaming, not crying, just quiet clarity that my entire life had been built on a lie I never saw coming. Before I tell you how everything unfolded and how I walked away from both of them without looking back, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because stories like this remind people they're not crazy for trusting the wrong person. My name is Rachel, I'm 32, and until last year I truly believed my life was stable, normal, and safe. I had been married to my husband Daniel for 5 years, and my younger sister Emily had always been my closest family member. Those two people were the center of my world, which is exactly why the betrayal hurt in a way I never thought possible. Daniel and I met at a summer barbecue in Texas 8 years ago, and from the first conversation, everything felt natural. He was charming without trying too hard, funny in a relaxed way, and he listened like every word mattered. Within months, we were inseparable, and everyone around us kept saying we looked like one of those couples that would last forever. 3 years later, we got married in a small outdoor ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Emily stood beside me as my maid of honor, crying during her speech about how proud she was of me and how happy she was that Daniel loved me so much. Looking back now, that memory feels strange, like watching a movie scene where you already know the ending. Growing up, Emily and I had always been close. She was 4 years younger, and I spent most of my childhood protecting her from bullies, bad breakups, and bad decisions. When she moved to the same city after college, Daniel and I helped her settle in and supported her while she started her career. At first, it felt great having her nearby. She came over for dinners, movie nights, and random weekend hangouts, and our home slowly became the place everyone gathered. I used to joke that Emily practically lived with us because she was always around. For a long time, nothing seemed strange. Daniel treated her like family, and she treated him like the older brother she never had. At least that's what I believed. If you've ever trusted someone so completely that betrayal didn't even feel like a possible outcome, comment below. I trusted them too. Reading those comments reminds people they're not the only ones who missed the warning signs. The first moment something felt off was so small I almost ignored it completely. One afternoon I came home early from a client meeting and walked into the living room unexpectedly. Daniel and Emily were sitting together on the couch, talking quietly, and when they saw me, both of them suddenly went silent. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then they laughed and continued talking like nothing happened. I teased them about looking guilty like kids caught doing something stupid, and everyone laughed it off. But that moment stayed in the back of my mind longer than I expected. It wasn't what they were doing. It was the way they reacted when they saw me. Like they had been surprised I arrived earlier than expected. Still, I pushed the thought away, because accusing your husband and sister of something like that feels insane. Trust makes your brain reject uncomfortable ideas automatically. You convince yourself there must be another explanation. Over the next few months, though, little things started stacking up. Daniel began working later than usual, several nights a week. Emily stopped texting me before coming over and would sometimes show up when Daniel was already home. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and conversations would stop abruptly. Sometimes Daniel would check his phone quickly and flip it face down when I walked past. Each moment was tiny by itself, but together they slowly built a feeling I couldn't ignore. One evening during dinner, Daniel casually mentioned helping Emily fix something in her apartment earlier that afternoon. The problem was, Emily had told me earlier that day she was working late at the office. My stomach tightened when I realized their stories didn't match. I didn't confront either of them. Instead, I stayed quiet and watched carefully. If you've ever ignored your instincts because the truth seemed too painful, hit the like button right now, because I know exactly how that feels. The real turning point happened on an ordinary evening while I was doing laundry. As I pulled Daniel's shirt from the dryer, something small fell onto the floor. It was a thin gold bracelet. I picked it up immediately and knew it wasn't mine. The moment I held it, I remembered Emily wearing the exact same bracelet at a family dinner weeks earlier. My heart started pounding in my chest so loudly I could hear it. Still, I tried to explain it away. Maybe she hugged him goodbye and it caught on his sleeve accidentally. Maybe she dropped it in the car and it somehow ended up in the laundry. That night, I watched Daniel closely without saying anything. Every time his phone buzzed, he looked at it quickly and turned the screen away from me. When I asked who it was, he casually said it was work. But his behavior was different. Shorter answers, less eye contact, random trips into another room when messages arrived. Instead of reacting emotionally, I decided to stay calm and pay attention. Emotional confrontations give liars time to prepare better lies. Observation gives you truth. For the next 2 weeks, I quietly watched everything. Late meetings, unexplained errands, sudden changes in routine. Every small detail started connecting like puzzle pieces, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Then came the moment that destroyed every remaining doubt. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel told me he needed to stop by a job site for a few hours. Something about the way he said it sounded rehearsed, like he had practiced the sentence in his head first. I smiled and said, "Okay." 10 minutes after he left, I grabbed my car keys. I followed him from a distance through traffic, my heart pounding harder with every turn. The entire time I kept telling myself I was being paranoid and this would end with me feeling stupid. But when his car pulled into the parking lot of Emily's apartment complex, my hands started shaking. I watched him step out of the car and walk toward her building like he had done it 100 times before. No hesitation, no confusion, just familiarity. And at that exact moment, before I even saw anything else, I realized the worst betrayal of my life had been happening right in front of me the entire time. If you're still watching right now, comment the word karma, because what happened after that moment is where my heartbreak turned into the most calculated revenge I've ever planned. And trust me, neither of them had any idea what was coming next. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes, trying to breathe normally. My mind kept replaying every family dinner, every holiday, every time Emily sat across from me smiling like everything was normal. The pain was overwhelming, but something strange happened inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I felt something colder and calmer, clarity. And in that moment, I realized something important. My revenge wouldn't be loud arguments or dramatic confrontations. It would be patience. And patience can be far more dangerous than anger. Because while they thought I knew nothing, I was about to learn everything. I sat in that parking lot longer than I expected, watching the entrance of my sister's building while my entire life rearranged itself inside my head. The pain was there, sharp and heavy, but strangely, it wasn't the emotion controlling me anymore. Instead, there was a calm focus forming, the kind that appears when your heart finally accepts a truth your mind resisted for too long. I didn't storm into the building that day. I didn't call Daniel or send angry messages to Emily demanding explanations. I simply started the car, drove home quietly, and began planning something far more powerful than a dramatic confrontation. If you've ever been betrayed by someone close to you, comment below, stay calm. Because sometimes the strongest response isn't reaction, it's strategy. In that moment, I understood something important about revenge. It works best when the people who hurt you believe you're completely unaware. Over the next few days, I behaved exactly like normal. I cooked dinner, asked Daniel about work, and even texted Emily casually about weekend plans. Meanwhile, I was quietly gathering every piece of information I could find. I checked bank statements, phone records on our shared account, and hotel charges connected to Daniel's credit card. The deeper I looked, the more obvious it became that their relationship had been happening for months. It wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a secret they both chose to hide from me repeatedly. The realization hurt more than anything else. Betrayal from a partner is painful, but betrayal from your own sister cuts in a completely different way. The person you spent your childhood protecting had become the person destroying your marriage. But the more evidence I collected, the calmer I felt. Anger slowly transformed into determination. I wasn't going to explode and give them the chance to twist the story against me. Instead, I started preparing my exit. First, I contacted a divorce lawyer recommended by a coworker. I scheduled the consultation during one of Daniel's supposed late work meetings. Sitting in that quiet office, explaining everything calmly, felt surreal. The lawyer listened carefully and then said something that stayed with me. She said, "You have more control in this situation than you think." Hearing those words was the moment I truly realized I wasn't powerless anymore. Over the next few weeks, I followed her advice carefully. I copied financial records, moved important documents into a secure folder, and quietly transferred half of our savings into a separate account legally connected to my name. Everything I did was completely within my rights. Meanwhile, Daniel continued acting like nothing was wrong. Sometimes he kissed me goodbye before leaving the house. Sometimes he even complained about work stress while secretly spending evenings with my sister. Watching that level of deception changed the way I saw him forever. If you're still watching this story, hit the like button, because moments like this remind people that manipulation often hides behind normal behavior. The people who betray you rarely look like villains at first. About a month after discovering the truth, everything was ready. My lawyer had prepared the divorce papers. My finances were secure, and emotionally, I was no longer the same woman who had once trusted both of them completely. I decided the final step needed to happen in a way neither of them expected. I invited Daniel and Emily to dinner. At first, they seemed surprised but happy. Emily joked about how we hadn't all spent time together in weeks. Daniel smiled like everything was perfectly normal. Watching them interact felt strange now. It was like observing actors in a play where I was the only person who knew the ending. We sat around the table, eating pasta and talking casually for almost 20 minutes. I asked Emily about her job and Daniel about his recent projects. Both of them answered comfortably, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Then, I placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots of messages, hotel receipts, and phone records showing exactly how long their relationship had been happening. I didn't raise my voice or accuse anyone. I simply slid the papers toward them and said, one sentence, "I know everything." The silence that followed was louder than any argument could have been. Daniel's face went pale immediately. Emily looked at the documents and then back at me like she couldn't believe I had discovered the truth. Neither of them spoke for almost 30 seconds. Finally, Daniel started saying it wasn't what it looked like. Emily began crying and trying to explain how it just happened. Listening to their excuses felt strangely distant, like hearing noise from another room. Because at that point, their explanations didn't matter anymore. I calmly placed the divorce papers on the table, beside the evidence. Then, I looked directly at my sister and said something I had practiced in my head for weeks. "You didn't just betray me as a sister. You destroyed our entire family." Daniel tried to apologize again, but I stopped him. I told him I had already spoken with a lawyer, and the divorce process was beginning immediately. Then I said the part that shocked both of them the most. "I'm done with both of you. Not just the marriage, not just the affair. Everything." I stood up from the table, grabbed my purse, and walked toward the door. Neither of them followed me immediately, because they were still staring at the evidence spread across the table. For the first time since discovering the truth, I finally felt something close to relief. Walking away from that house felt like leaving behind a version of my life that no longer belonged to me. In the weeks that followed, the divorce moved forward quickly. Daniel tried calling repeatedly, leaving messages apologizing and begging to talk. Emily sent long texts saying she wanted to fix our relationship. But some things can't be repaired. Trust once destroyed between family members rarely rebuilds the same way again. Instead of responding, I focused on rebuilding my own life. I moved into a smaller apartment, closer to my work, started therapy, and spent time reconnecting with friends I had neglected during the marriage. Slowly, the pain started fading. A few months later, I heard through relatives that Daniel and Emily had stopped seeing each other. Apparently, once the secrecy and excitement disappeared, their relationship fell apart almost immediately. That news didn't bring satisfaction the way I expected. What actually felt better was realizing I no longer cared, because the real revenge wasn't watching them fail. The real revenge was watching myself become stronger without them. If you've ever had to cut toxic people out of your life, comment below. Choose peace. Sometimes protecting your future means walking away from people you once loved deeply. Looking back now, the hardest part of the entire experience wasn't the divorce. It was accepting that family isn't always defined by blood. Real family is defined by loyalty. And the moment someone proves they don't respect your trust, you have every right to protect your peace by walking away. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. Stories like this remind people that betrayal can break you temporarily, but it can also become the moment you finally rebuild your life on stronger foundations. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe and like the video so more people can hear stories that might help them recognize the truth in their own lives. Now I want to ask you something honestly. If you discovered your partner cheating with someone in your own family, would you confront them immediately? Or plan your exit the way I did? Tell me in the comments, because I read every single one.